All right, we are back to discipleship practices. We're talking about the Sabbath. This is part 2. And so I know some of you guys are saying, isn't this the third week that you've talked about the Sabbath? Yes, but weeks 1 and 2 were only part 1. And so just trust me, it works that way. Okay, so we're looking at Mark chapter 2, verse 23 through 28. It says, one Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And he said to them, have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry? He and those who were with him, how they entered into the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the Pharisees to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And so we're looking at how do we unpack this. The part 1, we talked about the idea of stop. The Sabbath just is calling us to stop. Tonight we're going to talk about rest is going to be kind of the theme of what we're looking at. But just to recap, because this is a discipleship practice, this is something that we do because we're disciples and we want to grow as disciples. What are our goals as followers of Jesus? To be with Jesus, look at you go. To become like Jesus, to behave like Jesus. Everyone's always timid to start it. Everyone's like, but then once we get rolling, we get rolling. And so this is it. It's so simple. We've complicated Christianity and all of these things. This is it. What does it mean to be a disciple? What are we called to do? What does this whole thing look like? We're in relationship with Jesus, which means that we want to be with him. The more we are with him, the more we will become like him. The more we become like him, the more we start behaving like him. And it's not something that we have to think about. What would Jesus do? Nope. We just behave like Jesus because we've become like Jesus, because we've been like Jesus. That's it. And if we'll keep doing that, our lives will be wonderful. It doesn't mean pain-free. It doesn't mean no trials or tribulations. It just means that being a disciple of Jesus makes life so wonderful. Amen? Okay, so that's why we do that. So why do we need to celebrate the Sabbath? Why do we need to honor the Sabbath? Because we're disciples. Because we want to be with Jesus. We want to become like Jesus. We want to behave like Jesus, and he did pretty good with the Sabbath, I would say. Probably better than anyone else. That's a blanket statement about Jesus. How did he do? Probably better than anyone else. And so we'll just go forward with that. So the spiritual journey begins with desire, with wanting to follow Jesus and to be transformed into a new kind of person. If I don't want to be changed, then what am I in this thing for? Like if I'm pretty good and I just want Jesus to, kind of fix some little secondary things, that's not really discipleship. Discipleship is I need a lot of help here. I need radical transformation, and I'm going to need it for the rest of my life. That's why we get into this. Desire, then, is the engine of our life. Why do we do what we do? Because we have desires, and those can be unhealthy or they can be healthy. We have a desire to get out of bed in the morning and live. That's important. But when you pay close attention to the inner dynamics of the heart, you realize that the heart is never satisfied. 1,000 years before the time of Christ, the writer of Ecclesiastes said, the eye is not satisfied with seeing. It doesn't matter how much you take in, it's just never going to be enough. I'm not sure who this is, but the Rolling Stones said it like this: I can't get no satisfaction. It's a true sentiment. No matter how much we get, it's never enough. Thomas Aquinas, the medieval intellectual, once asked the question, what would it take to satisfy human desire? The answer he came up with was everything. That's what it would take to satisfy human desire. We would have to experience everything and everyone and be experienced by everything and everyone to feel truly satisfied. So in other words, we would have to be infinite. And because we're not infinite, there's always going to be a level of dissatisfaction that we live with. We have to understand that there will be a chronic nature of dissatisfaction. The word used by the writers of the Bible to name this is restlessness. Have you ever struggled with restlessness? Maybe you can't pinpoint it, you're not sure, but you're just kind of like, I don't know. It's not settled. It is a genuine part of the human existence that we all deal with in seasons. This is an ancient problem that is rooted in human nature, and it's been incredibly manipulated by the consumerism of our culture, and in particular by advertising, which is basically an attempt to monetize restlessness. And I'm all for advertising, like that's fine, but it's amazing. Do you know that we see upwards of 4,000 ads per day? All of which are intentionally designed to leave you and me feeling unsatisfied. So how do you know that? You ever seen an advertisement that's like, hey, your life is great and you have everything that you need, just way to go? No. There's always clearly there's something wrong with you, and the solution is buy our thing. Right? That's the nature of advertisement. And so we see this, we're bombarded with it because of the technical world that we live in now. Driving down the street, you're seeing stuff. If you've got your radio on, you're getting ads. If you're listening to a podcast, it's going to stop every now and then and throw an ad in there. If you are scrolling, the whole point of scrolling is to sell ad space. So you're only going to scroll so long before you get a pop-up ad. That's how they make money. And so this is what we're bombarded with, a continual waking, just drip of water to let us know that we're not satisfied. And it works. We fall for the old carrot on the stick routine. We chase more money, more clothes, more things, more square feet, more experiences, more stamps on our passport, more relationships, more. And then we find out that it's still not enough, and rest is always just out of reach. It's always on the other side of more stuff, but we never get there, do we? In the East, they call this the wheel of suffering, which isn't necessarily a religious idea as much as it's insight into the human condition. The wheel of suffering is what they call craving and aversion. Craving is chasing after the thing that you desire, what you want, and aversion is running away from what you don't want or what you fear or what causes you pain. And so the result is suffering, because the moment we catch whatever it is that we were chasing, if we catch it, we immediately want 10 new things. And the moment we solve one problem, if we can solve it, it's like the old whack-a-mole game, right? A new one is just going to pop up in its place. And so we live this life of chasing after and running away from, and chasing after and running away from. Is there a way off the hamster wheel of craving and running away from things? In a more biblical language, is there a way to fight against the cancerous restlessness of the human heart and the age to which we belong? And I think that the answer is yes, and the answer is the Sabbath, of understanding it and actually applying it. Sabbath is a practice of the way of Jesus in which we war against the restlessness of our age. And instead, we take on the easy yoke of Jesus to find rest for our souls. So we're going to look again at Genesis 2. Genesis 2, 2 and 3. It says, and on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. Notice what he did. He rested. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. Now, when I hear the word rest, I think of sleep, or maybe a little bit of margin, a day off, a few hours of quiet, just some time to relax. But the idea behind the Sabbath is more. It's more of a holistic idea in the original language. What Jesus referred to as rest for your souls, right? That's what Jesus was offering. If you think back, come unto me all who are weary and heavy laden, right? I'll give you rest. He's not just talking about like a day off of work. He's talking about deep, deep soul rest. And it's for your entire person. On the Sabbath, we rest from work, all work, not just paid work, not just our jobs, but chores, errands, to-do list, that we rest from working. But and I know, okay, especially if you've got young kids at home, you're like, ha, 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 ha. If I go an hour without picking up after these things, I'll just have to burn the house and collect the insurance money, right? I know. That's why I'm saying it's seasonal, okay? It's seasonal. Don't rule out just because of the season that you're in. Let's figure out how to make it work. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, in his book, The Sabbath, says, we rest not just from work, but from even thinking about work. Now, I will be the first to admit, boom, I'm guilty right there. I can't think of a time that I'm not thinking about the church in some way. It's just all-consuming all the time. And I don't say that as a complaint, because I've already talked about, I love what I do. It's great. But the idea of, even if Carla and I were talking about this one time, because as ministers, you basically, in the eyes of the IRS, those little demon eyes, I'm just kidding. They basically consider you self-employed. So whenever you're self-employed, you've got deductions that you can do that come off as pre-taxable, all of that kind of stuff. So it lowers your income, your taxable income, all of those type of things. One of those things that you can do is a business expense as a meal. And technically, now we don't do this because, it's a gray area, and I'd rather err on the side of, caution or integrity, whichever one you want to look at. But the idea is that if you are talking about your business, if you're legitimately talking about your business, then that is a business expense. It's a business meal. Well, I'm not kidding. 100% of the meals that we have, and I'm not exaggerating the number, 100% of the meals that we have, no matter where we are at, someone or something in this church is going to be at least a passing topic of conversation at that meal, because that's what we do. And so, now, that doesn't mean that we keep all of those receipts and turn all of those receipts in. I'm just using that as an example that, yeah, we may get a day off, but are we stopping to say, okay, one conversation and then we're done having conversations about this? We've got to go the rest of the day and not talk about the conversation. I think our only saving grace at this point we would have to go kidnap our granddaughter. That would be the only thing that we could be 3 hours, we're zeroed in right here. But that's the reality of the world that so many of us live in. And thankfully, like I said, for me, it's because I love what I do that I just think about it. But am I really resting if I'm still expanding all of this mental energy trying to formulate a game plan? What are we going to do next quarter? What's that going to look like? What's the next? When are we going to put this on the calendar? When are we going to do that? Maybe I don't even have my calendar out. But if the wheels are spinning, that energy's coming from somewhere. And so we have to look at it in these ways. Neuroscientists tell us that when we think about work, even if we are at home resting, it secretes the same stress chemicals in our brain as if we were at the office in the actual situation. This is why our brains, we can literally rewire our brains. Because if you concentrate enough on a thing, your brain will function as if you were doing the thing. And so, this works for everything. Golf swings. You can literally improve your golf swing by just focused thinking on a perfect golf swing. Now, going to a driving range is going to help, but your brain, if you can think clearly enough and focus clearly enough, your brain literally won't know the difference. It may not impact the muscle memory, but the little tracks that get laid down in your brain certainly will. And so you can think, well, I'm not at work, I don't have my laptop, I've turned off notifications, I've done all of that, but are you still, is it still firing in that direction? Okay. Deuteronomy 5. Now, you may not know this, some of you probably do, but the 10 Commandments are recorded twice in the books of Moses. The first is in Exodus 20. That's the one that is the most quoted, I guess you could say. It's the one, if someone's going to put it on a plaque and put it up on a wall somewhere, it's usually out of Exodus 20 is where that comes from. This is when Israel was at the foot of Mount Sinai right after leaving Egypt. But the second one is in Deuteronomy 5 on the edge of the Jordan River right before entering the Promised Land, which means that there is 40 years in between Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. So when the 10 Commandments were given in Exodus 20, it is 40 years later that they're given again in Deuteronomy chapter 5, which means that Deuteronomy 5 is to a new generation. It is given to people who weren't born yet or were still kids at Mount Sinai. And it's very similar. The commands about the Sabbath are very similar, but slightly different, okay? So Deuteronomy 5, 12 through 15, this is what it says. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So there's two differences between the Sabbath command in Exodus 20 and the one in Deuteronomy 5. The first is kind of a minor command. In Exodus, it says to remember the Sabbath, but here in Deuteronomy, it says to observe the Sabbath. And it's minor, but the Hebrew word that's used here means to keep watch over or to guard. And think of how we observe a holiday, or where the word holiday comes from, a holy day. Think about Christmas, all right? We guard Christmas, right? We make it special. We make it unique. How many of you have a Christmas tradition? Like just one, okay? Why do you have that? Because you have guarded Christmas. When you observe it, it doesn't just mean that you get up and you go, oh, hey, look at that, it's December 25th. Merry Christmas, everybody, and go about your day. You might do that. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to make too big of an assumption here, but I mean, normally, especially with kids, it's getting woken up while it's still dark outside, and they're jumping on the bed and they're freaking out, and it's like, and you're just like, 5 more minutes, right? And then it's like, and that's a lie, because they're gonna maybe get to 4, and you're gonna be like, no, come on, 5 more minutes, and then you're gonna run out, and you're gonna open presents, and there's gonna be all this kind of stuff, and some people wear, like Christmas pajamas. Carla's family, they all get matching pajamas on Christmas Eve. And I married into this family. I come from like sheer dysfunction. Like you didn't know what was going to be going down on Christmas in my family, but you knew someone was going to be going down before the day was over, right? Like that was the only for sure thing. And I show up to their house on Christmas Eve, and it's like everyone's got a gift, and they're all like hee hee hee, like they all know what it is. And I'm like, what's going on? It's pajamas. It's matching pajamas for the whole family. And I'm like, okay, so I married into a cult is what's going on here. And you're fully expected. You got to go jam me up. And you're going to wear those pajamas all day on Christmas. Like you're not leaving the house. You're having Christmas dinner in those pajamas. But you know what? It's awesome. It's awesome. And so you know what our kids did? They grew up on Christmas Eve getting Christmas pajamas. Because we guard it, we observe it. And that's the word that God uses about the Sabbath. We make it special, we make it unique. It's supposed to be like a weekly holiday. We're to keep it so that it doesn't become like any other day. We don't want it to just be another day on the calendar. We want it to be special. And so in the ancient Jewish liturgy, to begin the Sabbath, they light 2 candles. One of them symbolizes remembering the Sabbath, and the other symbolizes observing the Sabbath. And there's something really special about that. So that's change number 1. The rest of the command is verbatim, so exactly the same language until you get to the very end, and then there's a major change. In Exodus, this is what it says. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea, all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. But in Deuteronomy it says this, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, but the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. So it's the same command, but it's a totally different rationale behind the command. In Exodus, the rationale is grounded in the story of creation. God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then he rested. It's talking about the season, the rhythm that's built into creation. But in Deuteronomy, it's grounded in the story of liberation. You were in the past tense slaves in Egypt, but you're not slaves anymore. So at Sinai, the Sabbath is about the rhythm of life, but in Deuteronomy, it's about resistance. It's about the change that has taken place. For example, in Exodus 3, this is what you have. There's a verse that says, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work. This is Pharaoh speaking of the Israelites. Later, he says this, make the work harder so that they keep working. He also says, Pharaoh says, lazy. That's what you are, lazy. This is why you keep saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of books. So in the story, Pharaoh is a cruel tyrant. No matter how hard the Hebrews worked, it was never enough. They lived under the oppressive yoke of the daily quota. More. And it wasn't just Pharaoh. It was the entire socioeconomic system of Egypt. Do you know that Israel was making bricks to build what they called supply cities? They were entire cities just to store all of the Pharaoh's extra stuff. And it was an economic system that was built on the backs of slaves. And so they're not just working to build because we need this hospital. They're literally working to build new buildings to put Pharaoh's stuff in. That's what they've been delivered from. And guess what? To get this kind of a lifestyle, you need cheap labor to work so that you can rest. And slaves don't get the Sabbath. They are a commodity that you buy and sell. The only value they have is in what they can produce. They work all day, every day until they die. That was their life. Rest is what comes when you are set free by God. And that's the point that he's trying to make. So the command is to remember that you are not a slave anymore. You are in a new kingdom. You are under a new king. There's no daily quota. There's no taskmaster over your head. And the key is to remember to never become a slave driver yourself. So the first command is remember how God created this whole thing. The second command is remember where you were before God set you free. Why are you going to honor the Sabbath? Because you're not in bondage anymore. So the command, and then look at how they spell this out. The command about your male and your female servants, the foreigner, even your animals, they're all now equal under the Sabbath. Everyone gets to rest. God is setting up a completely different kingdom than the kingdom of this world. For 400 years, you were in bondage in Egypt, and you didn't get to rest. Pharaoh, he took a day off. The officials, they took a day off, and they built their kingdom on you. And you didn't get to rest. God says, you know what? I'm in charge of the kingdom now. And you're in my kingdom, and you get a day off. And for you to get a day off doesn't mean that you're going to make someone else work in your place. Nope. Your servants, they get a day off too. Your animals, they even get a day off. Why? Because God is trying to get us to understand that this is about liberation. This is about freedom. He's not trying to lock us in to more bondage. He's trying to get us to understand that we've been released from bondage. So we see that Egypt is an archetype. It's similar to Babylon later on. It was a real empire, but it becomes symbolic of all of these empires down through time. Do you know what's on the back of an American $1 bill? Some of you haven't seen cash in a long time. A pyramid, which has long been the symbol of empires. That's why it was on there. Do you know how many levels there are on that pyramid? 13. 13, because it represented the original 13 colonies. But if you look at it on an actual dollar bill, what do you notice about the top? It's not finished. Why? Because it is symbolizing that America isn't done yet. There's a desire for more. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong necessarily with a desire for more, but you think that we're talking about cultures that were like, 5,000 years ago, man, they were really rough to those people. No. We're talking about our culture. The very currency that we trade is marked with symbols of empire and growth. And we don't realize it. Now, it's got some cool stuff on there too. It's got the Roman numerals for 1776 at the bottom, and it does some cool stuff. But, and again, like America should expand. It should grow. Our economy should grow. If you've got a job, work well enough that you can get a raise, right? It's not about that, but it's about what kingdom are we living under? Are we living under the daily taskmaster of more? Because that's what our culture is telling us that we have to live under. Or are we actually learning about being set free? In the world of finance, there's something called the global wealth pyramid. So financiers use this. At the bottom of that pyramid are 70% of humanity. 70%, all of the population of the world, who all together control 3% of the world's wealth. 70% of all of the people on planet Earth with direct control of 3% of the world's wealth. At the top of that pyramid is 0.6% of humanity who control 40% of the world's worth. That's the reality of the world that we live in. And I haven't dug deep enough to figure out what the break point is. But just by being here, I'm not saying that we're in that 0.6%, but there may be some of us that are, depending on what your annual income is. There may be some of us that would hit that 6%, that 0.6%. So when you have 0.6% of the world that controls 40% of the wealth of the world, and 70% of the world that has 3%. And we know, according to the gospel, that a heart touched by God wants to be generous. We know that according to the gospel, we're not trying to lay up for ourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust and thieves, right? So how do we square our drive for more, which causes us to burn the candle at both ends and not get the kind of rest that we need and not take time off so that we can add to our already massive slice of the pie and more or less push out of our thinking people that are living in destitute situations. I know, I'm not trying to bum you out. But this is the way that we live today. And I'm not saying that, look, I love a free market. I'm like, go and work, and if you can make it, all of this kind of stuff. But I think we have to be honest to say that the environment that we live in is not going to point us towards biblical principles of margin and rhythm and living from a place of having been delivered, right? Because I think enough of us have proven this, that we're like, if I just can get that raise, I just need to get that raise, and then I'm going to, and you get there, and you feel good for a little bit, and then what happens? You're like, I just need to go get that next one. You know? Soon as your car gets right around 100,000 miles, there's something about 100,000 miles in America. You start to notice sounds. You're like, was that sound there at 95,000 miles? I don't think it is. And you got like 14 payments and you're going to be out. You're like, and like 20 payments, you were like excited. I'm going to get there. And then at 14, you're like, well, but it's making a noise now. And so, well, have you looked at a new car now? You're not trading in your car and keeping that same payment. I can just promise you that. So now it's like, well, I could pick up a few more hours. I can do this, and if I do this and I do that, then I can swing that payment. Okay. And we never stop to contemplate, am I observing and guarding the Sabbath in these decisions that I'm making? Am I doing what the Lord asked me to do in honoring it? And I said at the get-go, this is me preaching and me the choir, okay? Like, I am the world's worst at taking a Sabbath. So all of this, don't think I'm stepping on your toes, okay? I've got nothing but time up here stepping on mine. But the reality is, we've got to be honest enough in following Jesus to say, the way that we do it as a country may work for this world, and it does. Bar none, the best economic system in the world is right here. You want to live above poverty, you want to do all of that kind of stuff, you are in the place to do it. If you are born in the great United States of America, it doesn't matter what part of the country you are in or what background you come from. If you can make it through high school with a high school diploma, and if you are a girl, not get pregnant, and if you are a guy, not get a girl pregnant, you are essentially guaranteed that you will never live below the poverty level. That's the power of the economy that we just take for granted. So it's wonderful. Hallelujah. But are we stopping and asking that just because it works the best in this world, is that still the model that I'm going to pattern my life after? Or do I need to be asking Jesus, how do I honor you in this culture and in this system? I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do all of the stuff, but will you help me to learn how to honor, to observe, to guard the Sabbath? And a large part of that is being able to say, I have enough. I have enough. I mean, realistically, I've got more than enough, right? My biggest problem in life at this stage is not figuring out how am I going to get the thing that I need. My biggest problem is given stuff. Sabbath for sure is how am I going to get more rest into my life, and what avenues do I need to engage in to get rid of some of this that God has given me. And I would say that, I don't know everyone's situation, but some of you guys are in that same boat with me. That's where we're at. And that's okay. But the question is, Jesus, what do you want me to do with this? How do you want me to honor you in light of what your word says in this culture that I'm a part of?